Good morning. Welcome to our webinar on the intended 1.06% additional teacher salary increase. I'm Chris Cable, and with me is Megan Heeger. We are recapping information that was provided in a webinar shortly after the 18 budget forms were issued, and we will be recording this webinar and posting it on our website as well. But that webinar actually is already there if, say, perhaps later today you're looking for information before we get this one posted. So as we go through the information today, if you have questions, please feel free to submit them in the question bar on the side of your screen. We'll take those as they come in when possible, but if we don't get to one right away, know that we will take a look at them by the end of the webinar and respond. If you have something that's extremely detailed and very specific that we don't think necessarily we can address adequately without getting more information from you, we'll reach out to you after the webinar and ensure that we can get you the best guidance available. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Megan to get us started.
Okay, the law that created this teacher salary increase has not changed since we first presented this information back in June. The only difference now is that you should be working with some more concrete numbers now that your fiscal year 2018 has begun and your fiscal year 2017 financial information is complete. All of the information we have on our slides today comes straight from the budget form instructions. So as a reminder, when you are completing the table you see on the screen here, you can click on the blue highlighted text and it will take you straight to the related instructions for that line. When beginning the process of calculating the amount needed to fund this increase, you have to start with determining who is eligible. That information is reported on lines 1 and 2 as a head count and FTE. In order to be considered eligible, an individual must have been teaching at an Arizona school district or charter school in fiscal year 2017 and teaching at your district in fiscal year 2018 in a position that would be included in the certified teacher FTE on the AFR. The law was very specific in defining that purchase services personnel and substitute teachers should not be included. Therefore, if an employee was a substitute or a contract teacher in fiscal year 17 or fiscal year 18, they are not eligible to receive the increase. Here's a few common questions that we've received so far on whether or not someone can be considered an eligible teacher. The first two kind of go together. It's regarding teachers that begin work partway through fiscal year 2017 or teachers that leave employment partway through fiscal year 2018. The law does not include any different requirements for teachers who did not work a full fiscal year in either fiscal year 17 or 18. It only says that they had to teach during both years. If you had a teacher who only worked half of fiscal year 2017 and is planning to work all of 2018, they are eligible. However, the increase amount should only be calculated on what they were actually paid during fiscal year 2017, not on an annualized salary amount. The opposite scenario is a little more complicated. If a teacher worked all of fiscal year 2018, but only part of fiscal year 2018, they are eligible. However, in this scenario, you may want to consider when the teacher left during fiscal year 18. If they leave employment before the salary increase payment is made, it seems reasonable that they might not be considered eligible to receive the increase amount. Since the law does not address this, districts should be sure to implement a specific policy on when leaving employment in fiscal year 18 makes you no longer eligible and apply it consistently to all employees. Likewise, if you hire a teacher after you revise your budget by November 1, perhaps a teacher hired in January of 2018, even if that teacher would have been eligible because they taught at another Arizona district or charter school in fiscal year 17, they were not employed by your district in time to be included in the revised budget amounts that ADE will use to allocate the $34 million appropriated for these increases. So it is reasonable to exclude that teacher from the increase. Another question that we've received is regarding personnel that have changed jobs to or from instructional functions between fiscal years 2017 and 18. An example of this is an employee who was a teacher in fiscal year 17 then became an assistant principal in fiscal year 18 or vice versa. was an assistant principal in fiscal year 17 and went back to teaching in a classroom in fiscal year 18. In both of these scenarios, the employee is not eligible for the increase. One thing to watch out for here is you may have an assistant principal who receives a small amount of salary that is quoted to function 1,000 for, say, a coaching stipend. That does not make the employee eligible because they still would not be included in the certified teacher FTE on the AFR. Finally, another question is regarding teachers that worked part-time in either year. As long as the teachers are not substitute or contract teachers, filling a teacher FTE position included on the AFR, they are eligible, and the amount paid to them in fiscal year 17, whether full or part-time, is what is used to calculate the increase. Now, Chris is going to go over more about calculating the salary amounts to include for the eligible teachers.
Great. Thanks, Megan. We haven't gotten any more questions than those common questions that you just covered, but if people do have questions about what makes someone an eligible teacher or not, and you send those in, we'll get to those right away. Right now, I'll move on to what amounts get included in those salaries then. So you can see here on the slide that lines 3 and 4 report the amounts for eligible teacher salaries for 18 and 17. The 18 number comes first. That way, some of the math works out better and later in the table, where you can use the 17 amount more consecutively with the increase calculation, since the calculation for the increase is based on 17's amount. So the 18 item, the thing that's important to remember is, as it says on the line, it was before the 1.06 increase. The instructions in the budget forms give you more information about what compensation is included for eligible teachers. You can see here from the instructions that that compensation is meant to include all compensation that that eligible teacher receives that's coded in the appropriate categories. So we have function 1000 and program codes 100 through 630, because that covers all of preschool with disabilities through 12th grade education. And of course, it needs to be a payment that was in expenditure object codes in the 6100s, an actual salary payment. So we did say in the instructions that the amounts need to be consistent with the amounts you'll report in your AFR for 2017 for those eligible teachers. One question we've gotten recently, as people are now working on that part of filling out their AFRs and then making this revision, is that, of course, these numbers that are presented on the 17 amount won't equal your AFR because your AFR includes more than just your eligible teachers, and in some cases, it doesn't include some of your eligible teachers because they came to you from a different district or charter school this year. So the important part of consistent there was to be following the basic instructions of the AFR, the idea that it includes only those salary amounts paid in function 1000 and program codes 100 through 630. So that applies. Both the 17 and 18 amount are based on those. Remember that that 18 amount does need to be before the 1.06 increase is applied, because the monies that are coming to you for the increase did have a requirement to supplement and not supplant any other type of increase you were offering to those eligible teachers. So that's important when looking at your 18 number. We realize that even now, as you prepare your AFR for 17, your 18 number is still a bit of an estimate. You know a lot more than you knew when you were doing your budget form back in June. But you still probably don't have every little piece of what you're going to pay to those eligible teachers during 18. You might have extra duty pays that haven't been decided, right? Different stipends and things that will come to certain teachers when you realize which teachers are going to do that work in 18. So we know that that 18 amount is still an estimated amount, and it's something that you can revise in your May budget revisions by the end of the year to put in a more solid 18 amount, or that you can provide additional guidance and information related to when your auditors are looking at this for audit purposes from your 18 fiscal year. The 17 number should be a bit more solid at this point than it was for you at budget time frame. As Megan mentioned earlier, that's what you're working on now, revising to a more current and final 2017 amount in your budget page that is consistent with final amounts that are going in your AFR. Again, not equal to what's going to show in your table on the AFR. As we see here, the AFR table has certified teachers, and that amount is going to be all of them, not just the eligible ones. But following the same guidance that's here, as I've already said, the function, the program, and the object code. And again, not including, as it's shown here in the AFR in separate columns, certified substitutes or contract teachers in your eligible teacher amounts. So if you have questions related to this portion, as far as I'm sure there will be some, you can definitely feel free to send them in, and we will continue with the lines that remain in the table. Megan?
So for line 5, there is no instruction, and that's because the amount is simply calculated for you by multiplying line 4 by 1.06%. On line 6, you will report the district's share of retirement expense related to the salary increase. This amount is not calculated for you because there are a few different contribution amounts you may need to use depending on the eligible teacher. For all of the scenarios we will review here, it is important to remember that you are only calculating the retirement expense related to the salary increase amount. It is not the entire retirement contribution amount for these employees. Most of your employees are going to fall into the first bullet in the instructions, employees participating in the Arizona State Retirement System. For all of these employees, you will multiply the salary increase amount by 11.5%. If you have teachers that participate in other retirement systems, you will multiply the salary increase amount by the actual contribution rate for those employees. However, the amount cannot exceed the ASRS contribution rate of 11.5%. Finally, you may have some eligible teachers for which the district is required to make an alternative contribution to ASRS. For these employees, you will multiply the salary increase amount by 9.49%. These will apply only to teachers that have retired for at least 1 year and are now working for the district as an employee. Do not include alternative contributions made related to purchase services teachers, as they are not eligible for the increase. Like the retirement expense contribution, the amount on line 7 is only the amount of FICA expense related to the increase. The amount is calculated for you on line 7 as 7.65% of the total salary increase amount on line 5.
Before I move on to budget revisions, we did have one question come in. It's about an eligibility item, and it's definitely one we've heard and can certainly understand why you would ask. If a teacher taught in 2017 but is a substitute in 2018, do they qualify? They do not, because eligible teachers specifically indicates substitute teachers and purchase professional service teachers are not included. So if they were a substitute in either year, they would not be an eligible teacher. So thanks for sending in the question. So budget revisions, that's the part you're working on right now, of course. And as we've said, once your AFR is completed, you'll have a more concrete number to use in your budget revision. The most important thing probably to point out here is that you need to be doing the same notice and hearing as you did when you adopted the budget the first time for this increase. So since you're changing amounts in that table on page 2, you need to have a hearing again. Then you have to have 10-day notice related to that hearing. You can publish your notice on ADE's website, just as you did for your adopted budget. And you do have to provide notice to your teachers separately, just like you did at the original budget adoption. Remember that that revision needs to be completed by November 1st so that the Department of Ed can make its calculations to allocate the amounts from the $34 million appropriation by December 1. So if you have any questions about getting your publication and notice uploaded, if you're having any challenges there, you probably would be better off to contact the school finance unit at ADE, but the basic information was included in the budget form instruction right here. Audit requirements. So once this is all said and done and you've finished up your calculations and filed them, the Department of Ed will make the payments related to reviewing those calculations from all districts and charters, making those payments by December 1st. Districts will be able to make the payments that relate to the salary increase. We were asked in the past whether those payments could be spread out over the whole year. Could they have been happening already? Could they be a one-time payment? There's really no specific guidance in the law that said anything about the timing of the payments, so that option is open to you in whichever way your district chose to do it. The payment then, once it's made, you're going to be documenting and keeping that information to go along with all of the information you've already collected related to which teachers were eligible and the amount calculated to fill in your budget page 2 amount. I know that there's a little bit of a challenge there in contacting other Arizona districts and charter schools to get information on the 2017 salary amounts for any teachers that you may have newly hired here in 2018. But hopefully you've been able to get good information from the previous employer. There are some sample forms and reports that are posted on ASBO's website under Chuck's updates that different districts have made available as examples of what they're using and how they've gone about making that request, and in looking at how to get the information out of the accounting software that provides all of the compensation that's appropriate for eligible teachers. If by chance you have not been able to get any information to support a 2017 salary for someone you just employed here for 18, then you want to document all of the attempts that you've made to obtain information. Your district should have a policy about what it's going to do in that kind of case and follow it consistently so that you don't treat one employee one way and a different one different way. So if by chance you're getting nothing, obviously a teacher could bring you a copy of their contract. You could look at that for some reasonableness and just determine that that's something that's allowable for your district. Again, do it consistently. Hopefully you will be able to get the information, or already have, from all of the districts and charters that you needed it from. There will be some questions added to the compliance questionnaire. Here you see I put the S in parentheses. I'm not really sure exactly. Will there be one? Will there be a few? The questions will help guide the auditors to look at the information that you've included in your budget page 2 table and the supporting documentation related to it to see the calculation was appropriate and that then those payments were made. And if amounts are found that were miscalculated or not paid, then adjustments would need to be made through the 15915 process after your audit, and the Department of Ed would follow up with you related to that. It does look like we've gotten some questions in. So one question I saw in there was about providing notice to the teachers, if there is some type of definition of how that's done, or if just the fact of posting the notice for their advertisement is sufficient for notifying the teachers. So it's a great question. Just posting the notice is not exactly enough in my understanding of the way that you post notice regardless. This law had a more specific term to notice all the teachers as well. So posting that notice and then giving them information that that notice has been posted probably would be fine. You'd need to go ahead and follow, I would suggest, whatever process you normally follow for notifying your teachers of any particular information from your district. If that's emailing them, if that's an announcement at meetings, things like that, whatever is your normal process, I think is is probably the good way to go. And you want to document how you went about notifying your teachers in addition to making the regular meeting notice on the Department of Ed's website, or if you choose to publish otherwise.
And also, kind of related to that, someone's looking for some clarification if it's required to post the notification on ADE's website.
You're not required to use that method of publication. You are required to do notice and publication in the same manner that you did it for budget adoption. I don't think that means that if you posted on ADE's website at that time, you have to post on ADE's website now. I think it means that you need to follow the basic requirements that were required at budget adoption, which give you the options of either posting on ADE's website or mailing to all of the households in your district, or publishing in the newspaper. So you do have other options, but the option of posting on ADE's website is a pretty commonly chosen one.
And then another question received is on eligibility. Just wanted some clarification on a teacher that retired and then was rehired on whether or not they're eligible for their salary in fiscal year 17.
So depending on when they retired and when they were rehired, perhaps they're an employee for you or perhaps they're a purchase service personnel. If they are purchase service personnel, then they are not eligible. They have to have been employed by you, not as a purchase service personnel, in both 17 and 18, or employed by some Arizona district or charter school in 17 and now employed by you in 18. So fundamentally what we hear from districts is that the first year after they retire, they're not employed, they're a contract teacher through a third party. A year after that, perhaps they're back to being employed by you again. So if they've already made it through that time frame and are employed by you, they retired a 3 years ago instead of just retiring this last year, then they could possibly be a appropriate eligible teacher for you. Another question that came in was related to whether emailing the teachers the board agenda qualifies as notification. Again, the law didn't say specifically how you had to notify them. If you normally email all your teachers the board agenda all the time, perhaps it's not bringing to their attention that this is something special. It is something special. It's a different requirement than normal. If you make sure they're aware of it in some way, shape, or form, I think you're meeting the basic intent of the law. So if you are questioning whether what you're doing is adequate to meet that notice and you want to check with your legal counsel, that's probably your best bet, to make sure that then you're doing something that your legal counsel can support you as being appropriate based on the wording in the law. It doesn't look like we have any other questions yet that are not repeats of items we've already answered. Sometimes one or two will come in. Megan, we have one more?
One kind of other clarifying on that is when the teachers need to be made available. Is it the same 10 days prior as the notification?
Notice to teachers is in the same basic wording, so yes, it needs to be 10 days prior as well. Great question. One thing that we didn't hit on as specifically, but maybe as I did at ASBO a couple weeks ago, or the original presentation, was the idea that classroom site fund payments are often made in a later time frame. So just keep in mind that their 17 salary amounts include amounts paid to them in 17, including the encumbrance period. But if a classroom site fund payment for, say, performance pay related to duties done in fiscal 17 wasn't paid during the encumbrance period of 17, it's not included in their 17 compensation. That might mean that you have a 2016 classroom site fund performance payment that does get included in the 2017 because it was paid to them, the eligible teacher, in fiscal 17. So keep that in mind as you're looking at your totals for the 17 salary. We don't have any other questions that have come in. So if you have additional questions, you can certainly contact us. Do we have one more? They love to trickle in, right? Go ahead, Chris. What do you got?
Let's see. What is the process for teachers hired by a district in 2018 that were a different district in 2017 and the prior district does not provide the salary information?
Okay, I did mention briefly that it is the best case scenario, of course, that you get the information that you ask for from the other district or charter school. If you're not getting that information, your district needs to have a policy related to what you will accept in lieu of getting that information from the other district and be consistent about it. So if you're willing to take a copy of contracts from that teacher and use that, you could do that. If you're ultimately getting nothing, I did get a question the other day about, obviously we don't have anything we can pay off of. I would be diligent in documenting to that person the attempts that have been made to get information both from their prior employer and from them, and you've received nothing. Then document again that you're not able to pay them any increase without any documentation of anything. Now, if your district is making other adjustments to allow for sworn statements or anything like that, again, be sure to be consistent in what you're doing. Check with your legal counsel about how you're moving forward to get the most coverage in the decision that you make there.
We do have one question about receiving the funds, but this may not be one we can actually answer. It's how will they be notified that they've received the funds? Is there a specific account code that needs to be used for the payout?
So the notification timeline, I can't tell you for sure exactly what you'll get from school finance. I'm certain that there will be some type of notification or perhaps even a report posted with all of the different amounts that went to each school or charter that would allow you to see the amounts. As far as coding goes, this is a restricted purpose state funding, so it's going to need to go as a revenue in object code 3200. It's not just state aid. It is a separate amount coming to you for a restricted purpose. So somewhat similar to a grant type of revenue code that you would use for a state grant.
One question we've received is about the actual meetings they're holding. If they hold both the AFR and the budget revision at the same meeting, does it matter what order they do these topics in? Do they need to adopt their AFR first and then have the budget revision as an item following?
No. You can do those in whichever order you prefer. Obviously, the idea is that the information from your AFR is what's used in your budget revision, but it is not a requirement to adopt your AFR before you make this budget revision. Great. So I think we're going to wrap things up. We do have quite a few participants who've already dropped off, and we appreciate the time that you took to spend with us this morning. We'll review through the question list here just in case we missed something. We would ask that if you don't hear from us, you go ahead, and if you don't hear from us today or tomorrow, go ahead and send us an email at our email address here on your screen, asd@azauditor.gov, or give us a call at the telephone number there. Just ask for someone in the Accounting Services Division. Megan or I, or even Chris, who chimed in there momentarily, will be happy to help you out. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to having you on for future webinars.